Hello, welcome to class. I hope that your first couple of weeks have been wonderful and look forward to today's session. Today's session is going to be, our class is going to be a little bit different in the aspect that we are going to do two recordings so that we cover each unit in smaller sessions to make it a little more user-friendly for you. So thank you so much for coming. What I want to do now is just kind of go over where we're at. For those of you who submitted your work on time and in a timely manner, thank you so much. What I noticed was that some of you weren't reviewing the rubrics. And so I sent back to you via email the opportunity for you to go back in. If you were unable to go back in and correct that and still wish to do that, that's perfectly all right. What I would ask that you do would be email me to let me know. I'm also going to be available tomorrow by phone some, and Friday by phone some, and Monday by phone some. So if you need a time that you need to meet with me, I'll be more than happy to meet with you. We can chat via Microsoft, or we can do it just over the phone. So whatever works for you. So let's go over here and look at just your calendar. If you take a peek at your calendar, you see that lots of work has gotten submitted already, and that we're going to start working on Module 3 and Module 4. So today you have a couple of things due. Learn the science quiz and watch the video. And then if we go on to next week, you'll see that you're going to have some items due: therapy and adaptation, scenario reflection, and then work on Module 4. As we move forward, you'll see that spring break is the 2nd through the 7th, but you do have an ADHD discussion, and then on the 8th, school will start back. Please note that we are not going to be meeting on the 7th. Our next meeting date is the 14th, where we'll go over ADHD, autism, and a couple other things. So I look forward to that. So as we look on in our coursework, let's see here. We are going to go to the modules, and we are now on Module 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and talk, Module 3. I'm going to go through and talk just a little bit about developmentally appropriate practice, inclusion, and universal design, and then discuss how it relates to you as an early childhood professional. About 15% of children worldwide live with some sort of disability. So the number of disabilities increases every year. I hope when you view the Watch Me Celebrating Milestones and Sharing Concerns, you take the opportunity to take this free online course, because it's truly going to open your eyes to some of the milestones that we'll be looking at in developmentally appropriate practice. Some of which you know, some of which you're just going to benefit from having the support of being reminded of what those DAP practices are. As we look at developmentally appropriate practice and we look at children with exceptionalities, you want to remember that the most common disabilities are developmental, intellectual, and physical. And that's kind of a catchment that catches all of it. We're going to go through and talk about different disabilities or exceptionalities, starting with our next time together. When you're looking at developmentally appropriate practice, you're looking at an approach to teaching based on research on how young children develop and learn, and what's known about effective early childhood education. And remember that it's designed to promote children's ongoing learning and development. So, when we think about developmentally appropriate practice, we first have to think about where the children are. And how do we think about that? Well, we have to get to know our children in our classroom. We have to make sure that we are enabling them to reach their goals based on where they are at today. And then that has to change and be fluid as your time with the children changes and increases. Remember that children are all unique individuals, and that we also must be mindful to social and cultural context clues in which these children live. We're going to be talking more about that in the information that's coming forward in this chapter. So, what are our core considerations with developmentally appropriate practice in children with disabilities? Number one, we have to know about child development and early learning. Hence the importance of you watch me celebrate milestones and sharing concerns. We also have to know what is individually appropriate. We have to meet the child where they're at and make sure that our curriculum and our plan and our practice meets them at the level that they're at. And we have to remember to focus on the children's strengths and not their deficits. So we're looking on building upon what they already know and then adding to that to increase that knowledge base. We also need to remember what is culturally appropriate. We as Americans sometimes forget to embrace culture, to embrace different ways of thinking, and to embrace different practices that families have or things that they feel like are important. I remember when I taught NC Pre-K many years ago, one of the things I was frustrated with was the children's lack of desire to read and lack of desire to listen to books. I was very young, and I really didn't understand that the majority of my children were from a culture that did not value literature. And so teaching them the love of literature was something that I had to implement in my daily practice so that what they had a deficit at could be strengthened within our classroom. So when you look at cultural importance, you need to know who your children are, where they're from, and what's important to those families. Inclusion is not just a practice, it's a philosophy. So what are the benefits of inclusion, having children with exceptionalities in your classroom? Number one, we need to remember that it enhances social skills by fostering interaction with diverse peers. So not only for the children who are or who have challenges or disabilities or exceptionalities, but also for the children who are typically developing within your classroom. We also want to remember that the benefit is that there is an improvement of academic outcomes through the tailored support and resources. And we'll talk more about resources that are available to children with exceptionalities. We want to remember that it encourages empathy and understanding among all the students in your classroom. We want to remember that it also builds self-esteem in the children who, with the exceptionalities, but also in the children who are typically developing. And that in that confidence, the children can begin to feel like that they can handle anything and they can achieve. So again, build self-worth. Prepares all children for a diverse society. So when you look at early childhood education, you have to remember that long term down the road, you're going to be preparing children to be able to go into a workforce where there's all different types of people. And with the skills that they learn in your classroom, whether they are children with exceptionalities or typically developing children, that they gain those skills through your daily interaction. Being a meaningful part of society is something that you begin that building of that foundation. It's the first step to equal opportunity. It's the first step to just really personifying those American values to that everybody has a right to be successful and a right to achieve and a right to be who they are and celebrate that. So as we look at that, one of the things that I want to do is read out loud to you the joint position statement between the Division of Early Childhood, the Council on Exceptional Children, and the NAEYC. So as you follow along, you can turn to page 26, and this position statement says, early childhood inclusion embodies the values, policies, and practices that support the right of every infant and young child and his or her family, regardless of their ability, to participate in a broad range of activities and contexts as full members of families, communities, and society. The desired results of inclusion experiences for children with and without disabilities and their families include a sense of belonging and membership, positive social relationships and friendships, and development and learning to reach their full potential. The defining features of inclusion is that we use that to identify high quality early childhood education programs and services are accessible, that the participation is there and the support. So as we look at inclusion for all, we're going to remember that inclusion looks different for each individual child, that the differences are based on individual need, cultural background, social skills, type of disability, emotional readiness, and support systems. Support systems, you're going to find, is going to be one of your greatest allies, because the more you can be involved as a team, as a village of that child, the better you can meet that child's needs comprehensively. So when you think about support systems, you're thinking about family, friends, educators, support specialists like your occupational therapist, your physical therapist, your speech pathologist, and other types of therapists. They all help. And all of these attitudes and beliefs that are brought to the table help support you as the educator. You can remember that there is a lack of expertise in the early childhood workforce, and that's why you're here. That's why you're taking this class, because you want to become better at what you do so that you can serve the children more comprehensively. There also is a lack of comprehensive services. And as you think about that, one of the things that you have to do as an educator is have these resources available to you to give to the parents so that they can begin their OT and their PT and their speech, so that they can have a case management provider, so that those resources are there for the child and help support the child and help support you and educate you as well. Be committed to building that partnership, because that partnership is so incredibly important. So as we move through, we have talked about, let's just go over what our objectives were. Our objectives was to learn about the difference between adaptive and assistive technology, to learn about various types of communication devices to support children, to learn about various devices that support children with mobility, to learn about speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and early intervention specialists. And those are some of the specialists I just spoke of that need to be on that team, the Child's Village. Also to learn about resources to support family with children's disabilities, to learn about trauma and children's, how it affects children's growth, development, and behaviors, and to learn about the different types of trauma and supports of trauma exposure. Children will learn about creating an environment, students, will learn about creating environments and adopting practices to prevent further trauma, and students will learn reasons for challenging behaviors in some children. So we're, again, going to break this up into 2 different sessions. And let me go back to modules. Here we go. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about developmentally appropriate practice. And again, I hope that you watched that video. I think it's a great video to watch anyway. And then learn the signs, which you're going to get through that video. Referral, evaluation, and eligibility, the benefits of an inclusive environment, inclusion. So as you go through this, again, remember you have to finish the first one before you go on to the second one. Let's talk just a little bit about universal design. So what is universal design? Well, it's a way for you to design your classroom space, the routines and the activities that you have within that, your space, your classroom environment, that not only is adaptive, but also meets all children's needs in a variety of ways. So universal design was first kind of attached to architecture. And that was really talking about like building ramps and stairs, or in place of stairs, different things, that materials and products that you can bring into that environment that would help to meet the needs and adapt the environment to change so that you best meet the needs. And that a lot of times has more to do with the physical disabilities or exceptionalities. As you look at universal design, I want you to think of it more comprehensively, that the universal design within your classroom also includes things like equitable use, flexible users, being intuitive of the children's needs, making sure that you have a tolerance for error and you can make change, and just looking at the way that your curriculum and your practice meets and represents all the children within your classroom, allows expressions of different ways that they can integrate and perform within your classroom, and that there is a variety of engagement availabilities for them. So when you think about universal design, you're not just thinking about the physical space. Do I have a wheelchair ramp? You're thinking about things like, do I have the right door handle? Do I have diverse materials? Do I have accessible technology? Do I have varied instruction and varied strategies of instruction? Do I have sensory-friendly areas? Do I have a collaborative learning environment? I loved on page 30 and 31, the universal design in the classroom checklist. I liked this because it really looked at your physical environment, your classroom climate, and your interaction. When we talk about universal design, we're talking about all 3 components. So physical environment may be as simple as, is it accessible for all children? Are the door handles levered door handles and not turned door handles? Can the children get to the bathroom? Can the children get up the steps and down the steps? And then it really looks at what kind of materials do I have in this environment that is going to ensure that all children's needs are met. Have I looked at safety? Am I ensuring that the environment is safe for all children? But then you have to look at classroom climate. You have to make sure that your environment is welcoming to everyone, including the children who may spend only a couple of days in your classroom or who may be there all day. Are you embracing your literature around ensuring that there's inclusion? Are you bringing about the displays in your classroom that allow for embracing all different types of children, their cultures, and their exceptionalities? Are you making sure that you're not stereotyping? Things like don't assume that because a child has a specific exceptionality that this is the way it's going to be, because that child may blow you out of the water. And then avoid segregating or stigmatizing your students, making sure that you celebrate their specialness. And then just with the interactions, enabling effective teacher-child relationships and communication, making sure that there's multiple ways for the children to communicate, and encouraging cooperative work. You are going to be your children's best advocates, and it's really important that you do so. Sometimes we succeed and sometimes we don't. I'm going to share with you a time that I did not succeed. So I have a child who is on the spectrum. He is my grandson, and he is the most amazing child in the world, if I do say so myself. And we were in the grocery store, and he is a tactile child, so he touches everything. And as we were going down the grocery store aisle, he touched one of the machines. And there was a gentleman behind me who was very annoyed by the fact that this rather large young child was touching something. He wasn't misusing it. He was just touching the two and saying two. And so he proceeded to share with me how it was inappropriate that I should control this child, my child, that I shouldn't let him touch things that aren't his. And instead of me saying, thank you for sharing that with me, my grandson is on the spectrum, which is a beautiful gift. And he was excited about the number 2. And so, yes, I am going to share with him that he should not touch the button, but I'm also going to talk to him about the number 2 and what the machine is and how important it is. It may take him a couple extra seconds to respond, and I appreciate your patience with that. But learning to embrace all children and all exceptionalities is a beautiful thing. Instead, I screamed and yelled and told the gentleman off in the middle of the grocery store and upset my grandson because he said that I was screaming at the man and he felt sorry for him. So do note, I've been in the early childhood education field since 1980, 79, 80, and I should have known better, but I let the emotional moment take me over. What I want you guys to do is learn to step back and look at every situation as a learning situation, so that when you've got a parent who comes in and they're flipping out because this child did this or that child did that, you can better equip them with the skills to embrace exceptionalities as a beautiful thing and help us to equip the children with self-regulation skills and skills that are going to help them be successful. So, as we move forward, my question to you is including children enough? Ensuring access, participation, and progress. As we look at that, we're going to think back to our last session where we talked about the IDEA stipulation, the amendment to the 1997 amendment to IDEA where children were allowed access, participation, and documentation of progress. So when we look at access, there's physical access, but there's also social emotional access. And this is where you come in. Are you ensuring that you're educating your entire class about the diversities within your group? Are you helping them form relationships and friendships and learn social interactions? When we go to the zoo, I have quite a few grandchildren, and so we have a once a month grandbabies weekend, and all of my grandchildren are so wonderful with Maddie, my grandson, because they have this social awareness of where he's at and how he needs to look at things differently. And this helps them equip him with the skills that he needs not to run away, that he needs not to touch everything that, may not be touchable items, that he needs to not go up and hug people he doesn't know or touch people that don't want to be touched. And these children step into saying, hey, Maddie, got to slow down. Remember, Mimi's old. Or saying things like, hey, Maddie, remember to ask permission to hug them, so that they're supporting what we are trying to do as parents, grandparents, educators. Your class is going to be a wonderful asset to you because you've taught them compassion. You've taught them emotional and social access to every situation. Also, we need to remember that we need to give these children access to high quality curriculum. If you don't have a plan, if you don't have a map for your education, an activity plan that talks about what you're going to be doing, how you're going to achieve the things that you need to achieve, you need to get one. Because without a map, you're lost. You don't take care of the day. It's not playtime. It is their educational work that they are doing. And you are the facilitator of that. Remember to include participation as a part. That as we look at the IDEA amendments, participation was included. So you've got physical participation. They're actually there participating. That you adapt your classroom so that they can physically participate. So that if you've got a child in a wheelchair, that there's a table that the wheelchair can go up under, or that they can get to the hand washing sink. Also, the language and communication participation. If a child needs additional aids in communication, that you've got augmented or alternate communication devices, that you've got schedules and routines. That's so important in ensuring participation, because if a child has a predictable schedule, they're going to be more willing to participate. Then we talk about progress. Progress is the monitoring of the early learning standards. Now, you guys know, because you've been in classes, or this is your first class and you already did the assignment, where the North Carolina Guide for Early Learning Standards is called the North Carolina Foundations of Early Learning and Development, and that's NCFELD. And as you look at that, you're going to see what standards and what particular developmental goals you're supposed to be working towards. And that should be in your activity plan as well. Teaching strategies, high scope, the work sampling system are all programs that have a gauge for progression. A portfolio is a wonderful gauge for progression and a great gift that you can give your children, whether it's typically developing or children with exceptionalities. A portfolio is a beautiful thing. I actually lost my oldest son in 2010. And I had a portfolio from him from preschool all the way to 12th grade. And I now can sit down with all of those memories and look over them and laugh and enjoy the memories of his childhood and not be coupled with the bad memories of his passing. So you don't realize the impact you as an educator have to parents for many years to come, but you do. You have a great impact. You're going to ensure that you're monitoring the child's progression, especially if they have an IFSP or an IEP, because the requirement is for goals to be met and for you to assess meeting those goals and where you're at that. So remember, your IFSP is 0 to 36 months. Your IEP is 3 to 21 years old. So as we look at that, we're going to talk really quickly about individualized supports and interventions. Now, your individualized supports and interventions are very, very important. And a lot of you said you wanted to know how to support children with exceptionalities. So you're going to be looking at environmental supports, material adaptations, simplifying the activity. Those are all curricular modifications. You want to make sure that you have your identified exceptions for your children, with what children, you get to know them, to know what their strengths and weaknesses are, what their specific needs are, so that you can start problem solving to remove any barriers that may prevent their educational process. So as you look at your curriculum modifications and you have those environmental supports, like, and we'll talk more about different class mods that you might have in a sec, your material adaptations, and you're simplifying the activity, you also want to remember child preference. So if you have a child who has sensory issues, you're going to want to make sure that you have soft materials that are going to support the child, that you have sensory tools that are going to help relieve some of the stress that the child might be feeling. Special equipment is something like wheelchairs and adaptive boards. And then there's adult support, that you've got peer support, which we talked about, and then any invisible supports that you may have. And that is the supports that you implement within your interactions with the children. When you think about environmental supports, you're thinking about things like labels for your materials, shelves that are low that the children can reach, symbols and words that the children can follow. When you think about material adaptations, you're talking about grips for your pencils, specialized spoons. You can go to Amazon and find crayons that the children can actually use that are shaped differently, or have protectors around the outside so that the feel is different. Above all, remember that you've got to allow for flexibility and allow for something that doesn't work to find a new way to make it work. So when you've got the information and you've got your children's participation, if you see through their demonstration that they are not succeeding in that, then you've got to put on your thinking cap and think about, what could I do differently? Does this child need a visual schedule? Do I need to add sensory tools for this particular time? Does the child need a transition box so that he's got things or she's got things that they can interact with during high stressful transitions? Do I need to think about flexible seating options? There's different equipment that you can put in the seats that children can sit on that help them to be more comfortable in a seated situation. Some classrooms have balls that children sit on. Some classrooms have assistive speech devices. there's all kinds of different things that you can utilize within a classroom, but also get support from your OT or your PT, your occupational therapist or your physical therapist, because there are things like children who can't walk in a line very good can wear a weighted backpack. And so it helps them to walk in line better. Mav had a weighted backpack when he was in kindergarten, and he could walk in line with the weighted backpack. But when he didn't have the weighted backpack, he was hitting and flailing and pushing. So it's something that you learn as you go. There are compression t-shirts that children can wear. There's weighted vests. There's weighted blankets for rest time that can help to calm children. So as you're looking at teaching all of your children, you really and truthfully, and I've said this about 3 times already, need to know what the children in your program need. You've got to get to know them. Then you've got to think to yourself, how am I going to teach this unique group of children? What school-related attitudes and behaviors am I emphasizing? Am I teaching the children routines? Am I helping them with their activities? Am I asking questions like, okay, now it's circle time. What are we going to do next? Very good. And then when it comes time to transition, you might say, we're going to wash our hands. Now, let me see. Do I remember? What did we say we were going to do next? So that language is there, and you're teaching them routine and you're teaching them structure. You've got to be innovative and you've got to be flexible with this. So it may be that you have to put it to a song or a rap so that you gather the children's attention, but help them to buy into the process. One of the most important things that you're going to find in working with children with exceptionalities is that you partner with speech and physical and occupational therapists. I'm not going to be able to thoroughly go over that. So I want you to truly go in and look at OTs, which talks about the inclusion. You looked at your adaptive and assistive technology. As you work through this, it's going to open up a whole gamut of information for you. There is something called a one-on-one assistant. They don't use them as much anymore. There are some pros and cons to this. Some children need it, some children don't. But one of the things that you want to make sure is if you have one in your classroom, that you help them to understand that their presence is an assistance to you guys, that the child needs to be doing and achieving and making these decisions to self-regulate. So truly teaching that. So I want to go over just a couple of things. When we talked about adaptations, one of the questions that I've had from many of you students is, what are adaptations that I can use in my classroom? Fidget toys, sensory toys, word cards, backpack, picture cards, weighted clothing, visual schedules, pencil grips, slant boards, adaptive papers, colored overlays, tactile letters, communication boards, adaptive eating utensils, buzzers, bells, page turners, screen readers. All of these things are there and available to you. You can get them on Amazon. You can, make them. If you have a spoon and you wrap it with the PT wrap that people use, or when you get a Band-Aid and they wrap, when you get a cut and they wrap it with gauze or whatever, you can wrap that gauze around and then make your own adaptive items. So when you're determining individualized supports and interventions in your classroom, a lot of times you have to identify what that is that you need. So you have to really look at the child and say, what is the child's issue in this classroom? On page 45, it talks about the activity matrix for Jesse. I want you to read over that. There's some really important things. Jesse couldn't remove his coat. OT and PT were working with him, but what did you do as a teacher to make those changes? Well, you greeted Jesse, reminded him that he needed to remove his coat, stood in between him and the other children, and that maybe you attached a mesh net at the bottom of his cubby so the coat could stay in there. So there are lots of different ideas here that they did for Jesse to be able to make his time successful. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so that you can answer the questions for this particular recording, and we will come back in just a minute.